Show the screen.
Yes. Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining all of the distinction students today. All four of us worked really hard this semester being vulnerable, as well as going over different topics of social justice and global scholar work, basically things internationally and around the world. Today I'm going to be giving you a presentation on mental illness specifically in Muslim American communities and talking a little bit about the research that I've done and 3 different areas that I've kind of looked into, as well as changes that could be made in the healthcare system in the future. So, sorry, my brother's making the slides today, so any discrepancies, it's him. But one of the things that inspired this initially, so I started this back in last semester with Professor Khalil trying to do the global scholar distinction originally. And I was very interested in cultural competency in healthcare, as well as kind of exploring my own identity as a Muslim American and seeing where we can make some changes within our community. This semester, I joined Dr. Bentley with the social justice, and I wanted to learn different ways that we could give knowledge, so through creative writing or editorials or alternative means than just sharing information. And so previously I did a few religious studies back in high school, and then in these last 2 semesters I did mental health, diversity 101, creative writing, and then with Professor Maham Khan, I've been writing editorials and learning a lot on how to write an editorial for the first time. So the first thing I wanted to share was the myth that there is in our community, the myth that Muslims don't have mental health issues, but as far as Western lens goes, there is a lot of mental health issues that are portrayed in the news. So there's generally a huge discrepancy on where are the statistics coming from? What are the statistics? What's right? And then what's not being accurately reported? And so the first one is, this first infographic is from the FYI, so Family and Youth Institute brochure, and it's talking about the different mental health statistics that are currently, and by currently I mean 2020, present in Muslim American youth. Now, one thing I want to keep in the back of your heads for the entirety of this presentation is research is only as recent as 2020. So any research that I'm going to give, I'll give you the dates or the years that it was presented. There's 2 pieces that are from 2021 and 2023, but for the most part, 2020 is where research kind of stops, or there is a need for more studies to be done. And so within this, one of the things that the FYI reported was that there's 15 to 25% of Muslim Americans that report anxiety disorders, and then 9 to 30% that report mood disorders. And so it's definitely something that's increasing over the last couple of years. This next infographic, this is from 2017 through IMMH, which is the Institute of Muslim Mental Health. So they did a fundraising campaign in 2017 as a way to raise funds for some of the programs they were putting together within the community. And they had put this infographic together, and they basically raised almost half of the funds, but nothing past that. And then they used this research to do a study that I'll be talking about later, but they were not able to fully complete the like sample size that they wanted to put together, like the greater, larger populace that they wanted to put together for the next study. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was external context. So by external context, in traditional Islamic Muslim American communities, there's definitely some things or barriers culturally, religiously that we face. However, we're talking more about like what we see in schools, discriminatory wise, and things like that that raise that. So the first thing is the model minority. So this is seen as a positive stereotype, specifically in educational fields or specific careers. And it's prevalent in Asian or immigrant populations. To put that and connect that back to Muslim Americans, 40% of Muslim Americans are US born and raised, but 58% are immigrants that are coming here fleeing strife, conflict, or economic instability. So a lot of our communities have that immigrant background, and they believe that we need to fulfill social roles in a specific manner or have specific careers. And this model minority plays into it because there's a certain standard of excellence that we want to achieve. And there's that positive stereotype of, oh, well, they could do this, which puts additional pressure on each individual. And then with Islamic discrimination, the IPSU, the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, they had reported that 60% of American Muslims have reported at least one instance of religious discrimination since 2016. That is the highest that any religious group has had in the US. And then they went on to say that 56% of Muslim school-age children feel unsafe due to the identity, and 26% miss school because of it. Then that was also put into a 2021 Cali-based study, and that's where they found those findings for the second statistics. Then Time Magazine also reported that recent legislation in the last 3 years and legislation and administration that have been passed also contribute to higher rates of discrimination. So an example of that is with the 2017 Executive Order 13769, which was dubbed the Muslim ban. There was an estimated 69% increase in US-based hate crimes, in which the Psychiatric Association, they opposed that ban, they opposed that order due to the fact that they saw the mental health implications it was going to have. And so it's something that is increasing as time goes on. This is from the FYI brochure as well, talking about other statistics that they found. So youth struggling to balance their identity and having higher levels of oppression, youth who do not belong to any community, so that struggle between are we Muslim and traditional and from our immigrant countries, or how do we correlate that with our American identity? And then the discrimination that was reported amongst different high school and college-age students. So another thing that's definitely contributed externally is the peer pressure that comes with being in a school setting and having drugs and alcohol. And so this is a specific study that I'm going to go through. So in 2018, a Canadian-based mental health organization called Nasiha, they had like a call helpline for Muslim American youth where you could call and kind of go through your problems. And one of the things that they found was a lot of issues were related to self-harm, drug use, depression, and they wanted guidance on that. So then there was a study done with 216 respondents, and they went through talking about consumed drugs and what drug use was like. So if you go so there was 60% high school students that used drugs and 30% university students. 41% did it out of curiosity, and then 26% did it as peer pressure. So there was a heavy external influence to do drugs and alcohol outside the house. And with their identities, not with them coming to terms with their identities, it was something that was definitely pushed into them. And then 85% of them rated religion as important, and that means that the religious importance was there, but also they were having external factors, and 63% of the youth consumed it while they were in public settings, so like school settings. When asked, they said 40% of them know some Muslim family member or friends that have a drug problem, and 6% of them have a drug themselves. And so this has shown that mental health, like depression and stuff, has increased, and not only that, but they're using this as a coping mechanism. In this figure, they went through self-harm statistics within that group, and they said that 80% of them reported having clinical depression, and 60% of them had the urge to self-harm, and 46% of them acted on the impulse. They had a desire to punish themselves due to the shame or guilt of the community, and then they had suicidal ideation as well, so 62% of them reported that, with 19% acting on that. And these numbers were higher for females than males, and females were 70% likely to engage in it more than male populations. So here's a little bit more information on that, on the expression of what they were feeling and how they reported feeling during that time, unfortunately. And based on the results of their study, they determined that there was a need for research on substance abuse, self-harm, coping skills, coping mechanisms, and how to improve resources to help people with that. But they did not get enough people for their sample size and did not get enough fundraising for it. So they were going to increase their sample size by 167 people after 2018. But due to lack of fundraising, lack of resources, lack of knowledge, they were unable to do so. And this was done again in 2018, and I tried to look for more information, but they didn't have anything with an update in December of 2018 saying that this study was closed completely. The second thing I wanted to address is the religious and cultural barriers that arise. The cultural stigma comes from this being a very taboo topic. It's not something that's spoken about due to like shame and embarrassment of the families. It affects community views as well as like other relationships, whether it's peers, marriage, family. And then with the drug use and drinking that people use as coping mechanisms, there's a huge shunning mentality surrounding it. So a lot of communities will think that this person is beyond religious reproach or cultural reproach and a negative influence or impact on the community. So there isn't a lot of talk about it, and there isn't resources to access even in the community. And then if we focus on the infographic, another thing that communities have been working on is getting a better intergenerational dialogue going. A lot of parents don't understand the implications of drug and drinking culture in high schools and college age students. And so the way that communities have been kind of countering this is by having that conversation with parents and trying to change the mentality that surrounds it. With the religious stigma, a lot of people say that it's a test of God or not being religious, so it's punishment. And solutions include praying more or religiously centered care. So something that has popped up that has been a positive is Islamic psychotherapy. So using medicine as well as like religious faith-based care. And then another interesting form of medicine that popped up is called Nawabi, or like natural homeopathic means. And it uses foods and different fruits and stuff like that, and you mix it, and it's supposed to give like, it's supposed to help with like clinical depression and stuff like that. There's still studies being done, but unfunded studies being done on that. And then they think that mental health is also more of a modern idea or an innovation to religious teachings. But interestingly, there is scripture in the Holy Quran that discuss the relevance and importance of specifically holistic care. So taking care of mental health as well as taking care of your physical health. And in the prophetic time, it's said that they use like something like Nawabi or homeopathic natural means to treat mental illness. And so there's that. And then in the 8th and 14th century, Islamic scholars were ahead of their time when they were talking about like mental health because they built the first psychiatric institutions. So the Bimaristan of Baghdad in the 8th century, and then Kalawan Hospital in Cairo, which that's the picture of the Kalawan Hospital, and that was built in the 14th century. So they did things like holistic treatments, musical therapy, physical therapy, and storytelling. And another thing that was really cool about this was caring for the ill is seen like as an Islamic social obligation. So it was funded by zakat. So zakat is like one of the 5 pillars of like one of the 5 fundamentals in which a portion of an individual's wealth goes to taking care of the people that are in need. So this was fully funded by the people and they had all these programs that were there for care. So one of the things that started my quest on this was talking about culturally competent care. How can we incorporate more traditions of different cultures into healthcare-based systems? Specifically for this project, I was looking at how can we incorporate more Islamic-based healthcare, faith-based healthcare. And so the first thing is, what were the barriers in seeking care? And a lot of them were fear of different religious ideologies being pushed because there is a lot more faith-based, like Christian or Jewish, out of all the Abrahamic religions that kind of care. But with Islamic faith-based care, there's only select few that do it. There's a couple of hospitals that have done it, but also recently the Khalil Center and the Bridgeview Mosque have been at the forefront of that kind of healthcare. And then the fear of the inability to access cultural competent care. A lot of mental health professionals were working on understanding family roles better, how family roles, social roles, traditions translate, as well as various intersectionalities. So being a Muslim American in itself is an intersectionality, but people that struggle with their, gender, race, financial constraints, and things like that. And then increasing cultural competency, understanding the family dynamic. So there was a lot of research on in future mental health care for Islamic families, thinking about the family unit itself. So usually individuals do not seek healthcare, especially mental health care, individually or by themselves. They usually come in with their family, their parents, and so a lot of that care is understanding the family dynamic and addressing the family as a whole rather than just the individual. And then encouraging the intergenerational dialogue, which is kind of encouraging conversation between the elder generation, so like the parents and stuff, if their child is struggling with mental health. And then education in different cultural intersectionalities, and then alternative terms of, or means of medicine. So natural medicine as well, understanding that they might go through alternative or more natural means with fruits and stuff and how that interacts with medications, and can we incorporate that in our healthcare while we're also doing what modern medicine looks like. For additional healthcare resources, I mentioned creating more Islamic faith-based care and opportunities. So there's funding that needs to be done for Islamic helplines through different organizations. So ICN, Islamic Center of Naperville, is working on one, and so there's that. And then incorporating the natural medicine, and then cultural competency in higher educational studies. So studying specific intersectionalities within religion and what those statistics look like to treat it better. So working towards a more inclusive future, promoting mental health awareness is huge. So these are a little bit more on the people that are at the forefront. So ICN, the Islamic Center of Naperville, has been doing something called Taboo Talks. And it's where families start attending these conversations. They have done mental health, addiction, talking about gender identities and stuff like that, and how we can work towards a future that is equal towards everyone, where belief or faith and social justice and human rights collide for everyone. Khalil Center is a place that handles Islamic psychotherapy, so a lot of mental health resources come from them. And then the Bridgeview Mosque is also doing mental health resource like workshops where you kind of come in for an event and learn more about, where to access help. And then advocating for minimizing the stigma. And with that, the first thing that happens is conversation. So presentations and talking about it, great, but also going out there and like actively seeking resources to give to family members and things like that. With conversation, I plan on taking this presentation and using it as like a podcast in the future. So something that promotes intergenerational dialogue and podcasting with my dad and other people that are well aware of the topic. So this is one of them, one of the many. And then building a cultural competent society. Now, by that, it's super important to be having those conversations, even if you're not a part of the community, because a lot of people seek help outside of the community. So family is the first thing, but if not, then friends in school. And so if we don't have enough resources in schools or like amongst peers or people do not know as much about it, it's hard to get that care. These are some statistics from FYI, the Family and Youth Institute too, on like what we could do to better the future. So with the youth, making sure that we're nurturing their self-confidence and helping them recognize their goals and keeping them connected to faith and social programs. And then with family, having them being a little bit more important, giving them autonomy, but also keeping them connected to their communities. With communities, having positive social interactions with friends and mentors, allowing them to have high school or high quality after school activities, interacting with caring adults, and using social media to promote mental health literacy and use of services. And then with parent-supportive conversation to protect youth from the negative effects of Islamophobia and discrimination, it helps strengthen their identity and well-being to decrease those risky behaviors. So, as I mentioned, this project is going other places. I do want to start something that includes, talk about addiction and religious discrimination and different community issues, and we're going to be doing a podcast on that. But something interesting that I learned in this is not only about my own identity, but how to, like with Professor Khan, how to write an editorial, how to get this information out in means that are just not presenting or just talking about it. My plan, or what I would like to do, is make sure that this gets out to things like the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Tsunami, and different Islamic communities so they can read it in a brochure, but also get the resources and talk going about it. And then I just want to make sure that I adequately thank everyone. Professor Khan has been huge in helping me write, but also understanding how to properly convey this message in an appropriate manner, because I didn't want to make sure, I wanted to make sure I was adequately talking about everything with a sense of statistics. And then Dr. B has involved us in so many different case studies and allowed us to kind of think about our identities from a lens of everyone's background. And then our two leaders in social justice and international studies, Professor Khalil and Professor Bentley. And thank you everyone for being here.
Nice to see you. It's been years. What? It's been years, right? It has already. Well, I'm aging poorly. I don't remember how many years. Yeah, because at first I was like, you look familiar. Took me a second. It's nice to see you. It's good to see you. Yeah. How's everything going? Same old, right? Yeah. going well. I'm not complaining yet.
Just giving pins here. Okay. While we're getting set up for the next presentation, just to let you know, our Office of International Studies and Programs would like to take some pictures. Just wanted to make sure it's okay. You can use your images. Okay. All right. If anyone does have a concern, just please meet me in the back or whatever.
You know, I have a phone here.
Please welcome yourself to some refreshments or some treats. We still have some left. That's good. After this next presentation, there'll be a question and answer period for the presenters. You have not?
I have
Okay. All right.
And then we talked about it, I have not.
I don't know.
She's asking a lot of questions.
That was
Yeah, but even if it's not.
I took my word out.
I'm sorry.
That was. Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's my nature. My name is Erica. I'm so beyond honored to be a part of this class. I was a little thrown back when I heard there was only 4 people, but we made for a tighter crew, tighter conversations. It was honestly amazing. I went into the Global Scholars distinction really not knowing anything about it. And for that, I would really like to thank Director Norma Khalil, because without her, there would be no like Erica in this class. And she also helped along with Dr. B to make it possible for me to attend the class virtually, because I do work like 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I felt so grateful to have staff work so that I could be included in this. I am a crier, so we're gonna just try to avoid. Okay. As CoStar mentioned, and Dr. B mentioned in this class, we've studied like various themes, 2 the major ones being when culture and social justice collide, and then the other one being who like statistically and historically has maintained power. I lost my voice also, I should have prefaced that. Before I get into the project, I really just wanted to go over this last bit of the annotated bibliography from our project proposals. These projects weren't something that we just kind of threw together. It was very much a piece by piece thing that we developed over the course of the last 16 weeks. And I think the project proposal was so key in making sure that we tackled everything that we wanted to in our project. My reason for showing you the annotated bibliography is my project is a little bit more on the creative writing side, the English side, and I just wanted you all to make sure, or I wanted to make sure that you all know that I was also coming at this factually and on a pieces of research. So I guess I should start with my projects now. So my project is an anthology, which Dr. B helped me figure out what that even is. So an anthology is a collection of written works, and he thought that it would be perfect for me because of my focus on English and creative writing at Eastern Illinois next fall. It was also awesome to see on that end where a staff member was trying to help incorporate my interests, especially interests for the future, into the project. So I have created an anthology, a collection of written works that is focused on experiences of culture and identity as a Latin American woman. It is more focused on Mexican culture, even though I am Mexican and Puerto Rican. I just gravitated towards this because the inspiration for some of the stories really revolved around things that my mom has accomplished, which not to point her out, but she's sitting right there. Things that my mom has accomplished, things that my grandmother has accomplished, and I just really couldn't be more inspired and more proud to write about them. So, Erica. Yes.
Some lozenges.
Oh,
Will they help?
yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much. Sweet. Okay. So, in the annotated bibliography, awesome. The first page of research that we have here actually comes from my mentor for this project. So it's Dr. Monica Edwards from our sociology department. And basically, it's an article that talks about distinguishing group experienced macro issues from individually experienced micro troubles. And so from there, I was able to identify problems that weren't just experienced by me or just experienced by my family. Maybe these are broader issues that are experienced by other Latin American families, and especially the women in them. Sorry. Next, there was a study that I dived into, and it was the sexual assault among Latinas, or the SALAS study. And this was reported by Carlos de Cuevas, PhD, and Kiara Civica, PhD. And they assessed the victimization experiences of a national sample of 2,000 Latino women living in the United States. These Statistics relate to the occurrence and rate of these experiences, the formal service utilization, like resources and reporting, and then culturally relevant factors associated with experience and responses to sexual violence, which is something that I definitely wanted to get into for my project. Next, we have this one actually came from a women's studies class that I took here at Harper. And the brief that we were given was from Mary Daly's The Church and the Second Sex. Here, Daly critiques sexism and anti-feminism within Christianity and Catholicism. Her analysis of the religions, like Mary dichotomy, which I will dive into a little later. It unearths the institutionally embedded patriarchal foothold over women's sexuality and agency. And then we have a journal from Bartolome de las Casas, which is a 16th century friar that basically reported on the mistreatment and atrocities committed against America's indigenous peoples through European colonization. I wanted to emphasize that this takeover forced Native Latin Americans to adopt Christianity and Catholicism as their own religion, and thus the gender roles and ideologies that came along with that as well. And then this was a reading that was given to us in my recent ethics class, and it is James Rachel's The Challenge of Cultural Relativism. So here, American philosopher James Rachel combats the use of cultural relativism to justify or neutralize the morality of any given action, arguing that our ability to judge a culture, whether our own or a different one, shouldn't be demonized or rushed into, but rather held in great responsibility, as this judgment is what founds societal progression. I think when we speak about anything in relation to social justice, we are gravitating more towards being a society of acceptance and a society of understanding. And I think it's so important to remember that while we are still accepting and understanding, we're not using that to neutralize morality. I think that's it for my sources. We'll get into the project. We'll do a share. Oh, sorry. Perfect. Okay. And so I think it's funny that CoStar wanted to end her presentation with thank yous because I wanted to begin my presentation. There have been a million and one other people that have helped along with this project, but I specifically wanted to say thank you to the people listed here. We have my mom and grandma up in the upper left, my Curtis Sterling husband next to them. We have my mentor, which is Dr. Monica Edwards. We have Dr. Khalil, and then we have Dr. Bowman and everybody else from this class. I could not stress enough how much gratitude I hold for each and every one of you. This project could not come into fruition without each and every single one of your input, and I have been so inspired, and I will be grateful for the rest of my life for not only the information that was imparted, but just the care that went into helping me put this project together. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the cover of my anthology, created by yours truly. It took some time, finagling with little word art, but I put it together. My anthology is called Las Queridas, Experiences of Mexican Identity and Culture as a Latin American Woman. Las Queridas translates directly to the little darlings. It's basically what you would call any girlfriend or wife or woman of love in your life. And I just thought that it was so fitting to name this anthology after the women that uphold so much within the culture. My dedication to my mother and hers, Queridas. I'm not gonna read this whole thing, don't worry. This practice is basically goes into the objectives that we had for ourselves during the beginning of the course, which I will touch on. Within this project, I was looking to explore varying aspects of Mexican culture and their relation to the Western world, to connect and compare multi-generational experiences of co-ethnic women, to provide historical context surrounding intercultural social justice issues, specifically regarding women's autonomy, freedoms, and safety, and to encourage open dialogue within Mexican and Latin American communities, with the goal of preserving the best parts of a culture while creating safe, accountable, creative, and fair spaces for all community members. In this preface, I touch on the fact that there are so many beautiful, romanticized things within Mexican culture that not everybody in the world obviously gets to experience. I mean, there's nothing like a Latin childhood, and there's nothing like a Latin Christmas, and there's so many beautiful things that I can go on and on about. But what I find most important to speak on is a lot of the intercultural issues that aren't spoken about within the culture because they're considered taboo topics. I thought it was integral to showcase the innocent wonders of like a Mexican child, and then in comparison to one's first confrontations with fetishization of Latinas in the media. And that's my research consisted of statistics of what screen time consisted of, and that's looking like how clothed were the women on screen, what roles did they play, whether they were like leading roles or just side roles. It also included a testimony from Latina actresses like Francia Risa, who played the character of Adrienne Leon's Secret Life of the American Teenager, a show that I grew up watching. And she testified to being like hypersexualized and misrepresented on screen. Also through my research for this project, I learned that Mexico's intercultural war on women's agency and sexuality stems a lot from the religious agendas for some of the people like conquistadors in the 16th century, as I mentioned before, with the journal from the Bartolomé de las Casas, the Spanish Friar. I found it equally important to recognize and address and kind of like own up to our own issues with shielding or protecting abusers, especially when that abuse is towards women. And that was, you know, when I dove into that zealous study about the sexual assault statistics and the usage of formal resources. I've purposely written many of the harder to stomach topics poetically or in Spanish, which was a feat in itself because I'm not fluent in Spanish. This indirect approach, using a romantic language or romantic words, is symbolic of the ego pandering in like a nicely plated way that women in my culture are expected to operate from. I hope that this anthology implores you to research the historical context of your own culture, value even the most simple beauties of tradition and togetherness, and then help open dialogue to do away with ideologies or limitations that hurt valued members of your community. On to meat and potatoes. This first piece is called Muñeca Amada, which means loved doll. It's written, it's a prose piece about my grandmother and I, and just one of the many fond experiences I have. Oh God, I'm gonna cry. And this is a picture of her and her grandmother, which I thought was fitting, because it's so amazing to have like little relics like this to be able to value. Muñeca Amada. My grandmother and I walk into the panaderia on a damp summer morning. The air is warm and inviting. She picks out a small tray and metal tongs from their respective containers. A ver, cuál quieras. I know very little Spanish and she knows just as much English, but here in this bakery we are something universal. My eyes feast on the millions of panes, and I find myself torn between a chocolate concha and a dona de azúcar. My grandmother doesn't have quite enough money for an air conditioning unit, and yet I walk out the small shop with both baked goods in hand. Back home, my teeth rest into a pillowy bite. Sugar coats my fingers, sprinkling on the frills of my dress and onto the plastic-covered table. Sunlight floods me through the kitchen window, as I meet my grandmother's gaze. ¿Estás bien, mi mocosa? She asks, eyes wide and smiling. And I nod my head, partly because I can't speak a lick of her language, but mostly because it's true. I am well and I want for nothing. Okay, get it together. And there's just like simplistic joys and beauties in any culture that you just find yourself treasuring the most as you get older and life goes on. And these are integral parts of the culture. These are things that we should carry forward in their bodies. Ave Maria is probably gonna be my most controversial piece because it takes after the original Catholic prayer to Virgin Mary. The first and the last lines are actually direct copies from that prayer. And I will go ahead and translate afterwards as well. Ave María, llena de gracia, perdona a los salvajes que violaron y mataron el nombre de tu Hijo, quien pervirtieron a la fe para satisfacer su propia necesidad de poder. Aparte la cabeza de aquellos que usarían tu nombre para conceder valor objetivante a las vírgenes y demonizarían a las magdalenas. No merecemos las misericordia de Dios pero, por nuestros pecados, pero si algo le convenciera de lo contrario, sería la gentileza de su mamá. Por favor, ruega por nosotros pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. I myself am not Catholic, but I do understand how important Catholicism is to Mexican culture. One highlight here, Ave Maria, llena de gracia, Hail Mary, full of grace. Perdona a los salvajes que violaron y mataron el nombre de tu Hijo. Pardon the savages who raped and killed in the name of your Son. Quien pervirtieron a la fe para satisfacer su propia necesidad de poder. Who perverted the faith in order to satisfy their own need for power. Aparte la cabeza de aquellos que usarían tu nombre para conceder valor objetivante a las vírgenes y demonizarían a las magdalenas. In this prayer, we're asking Virgin Mary to turn her head away from those who would use her name to grant objectifying honor onto virgins and demonize those who would be considered the Mary Magdalens of our society. And no merecemos las misericordias de Dios por nuestros pecados, pero si algo le convenciera de lo contrario, sería la gentileza de su mamá. This says we do not deserve God's forgiveness for our sins, but if something were to convince him otherwise, it would be the gentleness of his mother. And then again, that last, por favor, ruega por nosotros pecadores ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Please pray for us in this hour and in the hour before our death. This poem was mainly inspired by that Bartolomé de las Casas piece. I think it says a lot about the religious dichotomy, the religious archetypes between a Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene. In the Bible, in the Catholic Christian Bible, Virgin Mary is seen as a meek and almost inferior, eternally virginal being. And then we have Mary Magdalene on the other end of the spectrum, who was seen as a sexual deviant, who was basically everything you don't want your daughter or wife to be. And I think that people utilizing these religious archetypes to kind of fit their own agenda for power is a disgusting use of faith. And I also wanted to just tag along at the end that if anything could, metaphorically get God to kind of sway his mind, it would be the gentleness of his mother. And I think that speaks to the incredibly powerful bond between a mother and a son in Mexican culture. I know my mom loves me, but when my brother was born, that was like a totally different story. And, that is that one. I'm gonna leave that alone. Madre defecta directly translates to defective mother. And in this poem, I'm going to be talking about kind of the boxes that Mexican women are made to try and have to fit into. And it's that being a wife and being a mother isn't all you should aspire to be in life. And if you're doing anything besides that, then you're doing it wrong. I've written the first part of this piece in Spanish to account for my grandmother's perspective, and then the second piece of the poem in English to account for my mother's. La promesa nos estaba comiendo dedo a dedo, sin importar lo pequeños que eran. Así que me fui, y cuando mi maternidad fue cuestionada, como si no hubiera cargado a mis hijos en mi vientre, como si yo no fuera a construirles una vida mejor, sonreí ante la caja en la que fui hecho para encajar, incliné mi cabeza y me reí. Marriage and motherhood came hungrily to me, and I supported their necks and fed them from my body. They were meant to fulfill me completely, but I forgot. And so after a full day's work, I attended class, and after a class, I crawled home. And when my mothering was questioned, as if I hadn't carried my daughter closely in my womb, as if I wasn't fisting cake down my throat to prove that one day she too can have and eat it all, I smiled at the box in which I was made to fit into, tilted my head back, and I laughed. For my grandmother's part of the piece, I'll just translate. Poverty was eating us finger by finger with no importance for how small they were. And this is the reason I left. And when my motherhood was questioned, as if I didn't carry my children in my womb, as if I didn't leave to construct a better life for them, I looked at the box in which I was made to fit into. I tilted my head back and I laughed. I wanted to highlight the last laugh that these two women have in my poem because although it's a little bit dark, it's a little bit dreary, they do get the better end of the deal. My grandmother immigrated here from Mexico in the 70s, and she was, her motherhood was questioned because she came here, I won't say like by herself. She had to leave my mom and her siblings behind because it was just safer to do so, and it was just more feasible to create that better life here. And despite people questioning her motherhood, and despite people telling her that she should stay, she came here and was able to create that better life that she dreamed of for her children. And my mother's side and my mother's piece of this poem, her motherhood was questioned when she strove to attain like higher education. I was a toddler when she went back to school, and she was criticized for not being physically present to change her daughter's diaper or to be that like active role of a mother, even though she was just trying to not only make a better life for me, but claim some of her own agency as her own person, as her own woman. And I also physically wrote these poem sections. One's a little bit more to the left, and then this one's a little bit more forward, just to kind of give a physical representation of the fact that my mom was able to start here because her mom started there. And because my mom starts here, then I get to start here. And this is all I have. So thank you so much. And not only was this project, it made me look a lot into my own culture, which my mom's always telling me how important it is. But it made me realize that there's a lot to be talked about within my community, and there's a lot to address. These are only a few of the works I didn't want to, because this is already drawn out, right? I didn't want to include all in here, but the other ones do discuss some of the topics that I mentioned in the preface. And I just really want to thank each and every single one of you for coming today. It means a lot to put so much work into something and have people turn up and get to kind of experience it with you. So, thank you so much.
Could have our presenters come on up if they wouldn't mind.
Can we go back to the picture of the book? Of
The book, yeah.
The book, and
Yeah.
take a picture.
Yeah, that's right. I think I should have known that a little bit.